You see that little notification that says low balance warning, and you think to yourself, wait, didn't I just get paid like 10 days ago? Where did it all go? And here's the thing, you weren't reckless. You didn't blow it on anything crazy. You followed the rules. You bought the coffee maker instead of going to Starbucks every day. You meal prepped on Sunday. You even have that savings account with like $200 in it that you haven't touched in 3 months because you're being responsible. But somehow you're still here, still broke, still stressed, still feeling like you're doing everything right but getting nowhere. And that's when it hits you. Maybe the rules themselves are the problem. My name is Macro, and I spend way too much time thinking about money, financial psychology, and why some people seem to effortlessly build wealth while others stay stuck in the same exact financial patterns for decades, even when they're smart, hardworking, and genuinely trying. And what I've realized, honestly, after years of watching people navigate money, is that most of us are following advice that sounds good on paper, but quietly, almost invisibly, keeps us average. Not broke, not thriving, just average. Comfortable enough not to panic, but never comfortable enough to breathe. And the wildest part? These rules come from people we trust. Financial experts, our parents, that one friend who seems like they have it together because they drive a nice car, even though you have no idea what their actual net worth is. We absorb these ideas without questioning them because they sound responsible, they sound safe, they sound like what you're supposed to do. But here's what nobody tells you. Supposed to and actually works are not always the same thing. So today, I want to walk through some of these rules with you, not to trash them completely because some of them do have a kernel of truth, but to show you the subtle ways they keep you playing small. And more importantly, I want to give you a different lens, a way of thinking about money that doesn't feel like deprivation or guilt, but actually opens up possibilities. Because here's the truth. Wealth isn't just about working harder or budgeting better, it's about thinking differently. And that shift, that's what we're here to explore. Okay, so this one is like the gold standard of personal finance advice, right? Every book, every podcast, every well-meaning uncle at Thanksgiving dinner has told you this. Pay yourself first. The idea is simple. Before you pay your bills, before you do anything else, you take a percentage of your paycheck and put it into savings or investments. 10% is the magic number everyone throws around. And in theory, yeah, this makes sense. You're prioritizing your future. You're building a cushion. You're being smart. But here's where it quietly fails most people. Let's say you make $3,000 a month after taxes. You dutifully set aside $300. You feel good about it for like a day. Then rent is due, $1,200. Car payment, insurance, phone bill, groceries, gas, that weird subscription you forgot to cancel. It all adds up, and suddenly you're living on $1,500 a month, maybe less. You're stressed. You're saying no to going out with friends. You're eating rice and beans for the 4th night in a row. And yeah, technically you're saving, but you're miserable. And here's the kicker. You're so tight on cash that the second something unexpected happens, a flat tire, a medical bill, literally anything, you have to dip back into that savings. So you never actually build momentum. You're just shuffling money around in circles. This is what I call the poverty simulation savings plan. You're artificially making yourself broke today in hopes of being comfortable someday. And for some people, sure, that works. But for most, it just breeds resentment. You start to associate saving money with suffering, and eventually you burn out and stop doing it altogether. The problem isn't the concept of paying yourself first. The problem is that it assumes your income is already enough to comfortably cover your life and have extra left over. But if you're barely making ends meet, taking 10% off the top doesn't make you wealthy. It just makes you stressed. What actually works better? Increase your income first. I know, easier said than done, but think about it. If you're making $3,000 a month and you're struggling, the answer isn't to save harder. The answer is to figure out how to make $4,000 or $5,000. Because when you have more coming in, saving doesn't feel like sacrifice. It feels easy, automatic, natural. Wealth isn't built by being stingy with yourself. It's built by expanding what's possible. Oh man, this one. This is the advice that just will not die. You've heard it a million times. If you just stopped buying coffee every day, you'd save enough to retire early. Skip the $5 latte, make coffee at home, and boom, you're a millionaire by 50. And listen, I get it. The math is compelling. $5 a day, 5 days a week, 52 weeks a year. That's like $1,300. Invested over 30 years with compound interest? Sure, it adds up. But here's what drives me crazy about this advice. It's small-minded. It's focused on cutting, restricting, denying yourself tiny pleasures in the hope that deprivation will somehow lead to abundance. And I'm sorry, but that's just backwards. Let me tell you a story. I had a friend, let's call her Sarah, who took this advice to heart. She stopped buying coffee, stopped going out to lunch, started bringing Tupperware containers of leftovers to work every single day. She was so proud of herself. She'd calculate how much she was saving every week and put it in a spreadsheet. And yeah, she saved maybe $1,000 over the course of a year. But here's what also happened. She stopped networking. She stopped going to those casual coffee meetups where people in her industry would talk shop and share opportunities. She stopped building relationships because she was so focused on saving $5. Meanwhile, another guy in her office, let's call him Dan, was the opposite. Dan always bought lunch, always grabbed coffee with people, always said yes to happy hour. And you know what? Dan got promoted because Dan was visible. Dan was connected. Dan understood that sometimes spending money strategically creates more value than saving it. Now, I'm not saying you should blow your paycheck on lattes. What I'm saying is this. Cutting expenses has a floor. You can only cut so much. But increasing your income, that has no ceiling. And yet we spend so much mental energy obsessing over saving $5 that we completely miss opportunities to earn $500 or $5,000. The wealthiest people I know don't budget obsessively. They invest obsessively. They invest in skills, relationships, experiences, and opportunities that increase their earning potential. They think in terms of ROI, return on investment, not just savings. And that shift in mindset, that's everything. All right, this is a big one, and I know I'm going to get some pushback here because debt has like this massive stigma attached to it. We've been taught that debt is bad, debt is dangerous, debt is something you avoid if you're smart and responsible. And sure, bad debt, credit card debt at 20% interest because you bought stuff you didn't need, that's obviously not great. But here's the thing nobody talks about. Good debt is literally how wealth is built. Think about it. Every real estate investor, every business owner, every person who's built serious wealth has used leverage. They've borrowed money to buy assets that generate income or appreciate in value. They understand that $1 today invested wisely is worth way more than $1 saved for tomorrow. But we've been so scared of debt that we miss this completely.
I remember talking to this guy. Mid-30s, decent job, no debt. Felt really proud of that. He'd saved up like $30,000 in cash, just sitting there in a savings account earning basically nothing. And I asked them, have you ever thought about investing in real estate, even just a small property? And he looked at me like I was insane. I'm not going into debt, he said. I worked too hard to be debt-free. And I get that. I really do. There's a psychological comfort in having no debt. But here's the reality. While he was sitting on 30 grand in cash, inflation was quietly eroding its value. Meanwhile, people who bought property 5 years ago, even with a mortgage, even with debt, have seen their equity double, sometimes triple. They used the bank's money to build wealth. They understood leverage. Now, obviously, not everyone should run out and take on massive debt. That's not what I'm saying. What I'm saying is that debt is a tool. And like any tool, it can be used wisely or poorly. A hammer can build a house or smash your thumb. It depends on how you use it. But refusing to ever pick up the hammer because you're scared of getting hurt, that's not wisdom. That's just fear. The average person avoids all debt. The wealthy person understands the difference between good debt and bad debt and uses good debt strategically. Okay, this one sounds so reasonable, doesn't it? Live below your means. Don't spend more than you make. Basic, sensible advice. And yes, obviously, you shouldn't be racking up credit card debt, buying stuff you can't afford. But here's where this advice quietly becomes a trap. Living below your means, for most people, turns into living small. It becomes an identity. You start to wear frugality like a badge of honor. You brag about finding the cheapest gas station, the best coupon deals, how you haven't bought new clothes in 2 years. And sure, there's a certain virtue in not being wasteful, but there's also a cost. Because when you're constantly focused on living below your means, you're training your brain to think small. You're reinforcing the idea that you need to make do with less. And over time, that mentality seeps into everything. You don't negotiate for a higher salary because you've convinced yourself you don't really need it. You don't invest in yourself, courses, coaching, networking events, because it feels like an unnecessary expense. You stay in your comfort zone because expanding feels risky and expensive. I saw this happen with a family member of mine. Brilliant guy, really talented, but he was so committed to living below his means that he never took any risks. Never started the business he talked about, never moved to the city where his industry was booming because rent was higher. He saved money, sure, but he also saved himself right into mediocrity. And now, 20 years later, he's still in the same spot, wondering why his career never took off. Here's the truth. Wealthy people don't live below their means. They expand their means. They focus on increasing their income, their skills, their network, their opportunities. And yes, they're strategic about spending, but they're not cheap. They invest in things that create value. They understand that sometimes you have to spend money to make money. Living below your means keeps you safe, but it also keeps you small. And there's a big difference between being financially responsible and being financially scared. All right, last one. And this is probably the most controversial thing I'm going to say, so bear with me. You've been told to diversify, right? Don't put all your eggs in one basket. Spread your investments across stocks, bonds, real estate, maybe some crypto, whatever. The idea is that if one thing fails, you're protected. It's safe. It's smart. It's what every financial advisor tells you to do. But here's the problem with diversification. It's a strategy designed to prevent you from losing big, not to help you win big. Think about every person who's built serious, generational wealth. Did they diversify? No. They went all in on one thing. Bill Gates, Microsoft. Bezos, Amazon. Every successful entrepreneur, every real estate mogul, every person who's genuinely wealthy, they concentrated their efforts, their capital, their energy into one thing and dominated it. They didn't spread themselves thin. They went deep. Now, I'm not saying you should YOLO your entire savings into one stock or one business. That's reckless. But I am saying that diversification, for most people, becomes an excuse for not committing. You dabble in a little bit of everything and never get good at anything. You own a little real estate, a little stock, a little crypto, and none of it moves the needle because you're not deeply invested, literally or figuratively, in any of it. Diversification is what you do when you're trying to preserve wealth, but when you're trying to build wealth, you need focus. You need to find your edge, your advantage, the thing you understand better than most people, and you need to go hard on that. Yeah, it's riskier, but average returns come from average strategies, and if you're serious about breaking out of average, you can't play it safe forever. There's a time for diversification, but it's not at the beginning. It's after you've already built something significant. Look, I'm not here to tell you that all financial advice is garbage. Some of it is useful. Some of it works for certain people in certain situations. But here's what I want you to take away from this. The rules that keep you average are the ones that focus on limiting, restricting, and protecting what you already have. They're designed to keep you safe, not to help you grow. Wealth, the kind that actually changes your life, the kind that gives you freedom and options and the ability to breathe, doesn't come from following the standard playbook. It comes from thinking differently. It comes from understanding that money is a tool, not a goal, that income is more important than savings, that leverage, used wisely, is more powerful than caution, that focus beats diversification when you're still building, that investing in yourself is the highest return investment you'll ever make. And yeah, this might sound risky. It might sound like I'm telling you to abandon all sense of financial responsibility and just wing it. But that's not it. What I'm saying is this. If you keep doing what everyone else is doing, you'll keep getting what everyone else is getting. And for most people, that's stress, frustration, and the nagging feeling that they're working really hard but not getting anywhere. You don't have to live like that. You don't have to follow rules that were written for a different time, a different economy, a different version of success. You get to decide what wealth means to you. You get to build your own strategy. And yeah, that might mean making mistakes, taking risks, trying things that don't work. But it also means you're actually moving, you're learning, you're growing. And that, honestly, is the only way you ever break out of average. So here's my challenge to you. Pick one rule you've been following without questioning it, just one, and ask yourself, is this actually helping me build wealth, or is it just keeping me comfortable? Is it expanding my possibilities, or is it keeping me small? And then be brave enough to try something different. Because the truth is, the life you want is on the other side of the advice you've been too scared to ignore.